World Ablaze Inc. brings you a podcast based on truth, spoken boldly. Join the man on fire, John Sablan, as he takes on issues of faith and culture. Always faithful, always real. This is True Faith, Real Talk. And now, the man on fire, John Sablan.
Welcome to another episode of True Faith, Real Talk. I'm your host, the man on fire, John Sablan of johnsablan.com. And definitely pumped up for today's episode. This is a guest I've been trying to get on for quite some time now, so I'm very appreciative of his time today because I know he's a busy man. And I ran into this guest really when I was checking out Taylor Marshall's YouTube channel, which most of my viewers, I'm sure, are familiar with Dr. Taylor Marshall and all the things he's doing there. And it was the TNT show. And was just really impressed with Dr. Timothy Gordon and all he's got going on. Specifically, I mean, you viewers know how I am. I'm as the title of the podcast is True Faith, Real Talk. Don't care to mince words. You've seen some of my guests, you know, with the likes of Michael Voris and Jesse Romero and Doug Barry. And now I welcome to the show Dr. Timothy Gordon. What's going on?
What's up, John? Great to meet you, man.
Yeah. Glad to have you on the show. And as we were talking about offline, we both reside in the crazy state of California. I'm just about, let's just call it 4 hours north of you. So I'm super pumped that I got somebody fighting the good fight here in the land of the cray-cray.
Yeah, but people outside California, they don't understand that we live in the valley. We're valley rats. They don't know what the heck the valley is. The Great Central Valley from basically here. I'm at the very southern end. I'm, only an hour and a half from LA, all the way to like San Francisco. People don't know that it's still kind of wacky, but it's a much more conservative agricultural version of California. That's right. A lot of people, when I would talk to Taylor, I think, because I am pretty close to LA, I'm a lot closer to LA than you are. Yeah. He thought it was like La La Land. Now, this is kind of agricultural land here in Bakersfield. We have weird stuff that happens in Bakersfield, like meth production and whatnot, but it's not the glitzy, glamorous LA scene. It's a whole different kind of whatever, and it is politically kind of conservative. So, cray in a different way.
Well, yeah. So I think we're much alike. I think Modesto, where I'm at in Northern California, we're about an hour and a half south of Sacramento and about 2 hours from San Francisco. We're about a population about 200,000. I think Bakersfield's about close to 400,000 down there. So just kind of, everyone kind of relates everything to California as like Frisco or LA. So anyways, I'm just glad you're down there. When I get a chance to get down there, I definitely would like to hook up with you and just talk shop and sharpen iron. But before we kind of get into
go have a beer or four.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about you've got degrees in philosophy, in history, in literature, and in law. Basically, you're just one smart dude, way ahead of my pedigree in my brain. But can you give my at least viewers kind of a little bit of your background? I know you've authored one book, Catholic Republic. We're talking about the newly released book or pre-ordered release book of Rules for Retrograde. You've kind of spun off and done your own thing with your brother. It's Dave Gordon, right?
Dave, little brother.
Little bro. Then was it Chris? Chris is the other one, right?
Yeah, Chris is kind of an occasional retrograde. He's a busy guy too. He actually lives in LA, so he's what everyone's thinking. He does Bible studies to the stars. He's just real busy. He's an incredibly charismatic dude, and he's an Angelino, and he's like Bible study to the stars, personal family. I won't even say all the people he's done personal family Bible studies for. Great Catholic dude, closer to the belly of the beast. Yeah. And Dave's great. Dave's a theology background. Chris is a theology background. I'm a philosophy background. I have I'm not actually a doctor. I kind of stopped correcting people because I like them slipping doctor into my pedigree. But no, I was about to begin the doctorate, studying at the Pontifical School de Greg, the first Jesuit university in the world in Rome, when my daughter, who I've shared the story with people, was born out there. We were forced back to the States, so I'd already had a master's in philosophy. They gave me something called a PhL. in philosophy, and then I came back and got a JD in constitutional law, and I had an undergrad degree in literature and history, so it kind of rounded me out as humanities man. Just all the humanities degrees I have. I'll probably finish the PhD here before too long, but for right now, I'm just a guy, not a doctor. If you can believe that.
You got your JD, man. That's good enough for me. So either way, you're a very intelligent man, and I appreciate all you're trying to do for Holy Mother Church and for the culture and society as a whole.
Thanks. I need to go to England, where barristers, lawyers actually can be called doctor, because it is a Juris Doctorate.
Yeah.
So I'd like to be called a doctor, but here I'd be hauled into court for fraud or something if I were.
Well, I mean, you can just identify as one, right? I mean, at this point where we're at, that would count.
Yeah, that's right. I'm transitioning into my life as a doctor. Today I'm feeling doctorish, and I mean, maybe even a medical doc. You got a cough or anything? Maybe I'll just start treating people.
Well, yeah, I'm getting older, brother. So if you could help me out with, helping out the skin or whatever it may be. So hey, let's touch on. I know you've already shared your story with your viewers, but one of the things that whenever I bring on guests, if there is a story of either reversion or conversion, can you maybe give us the Reader's Digest version, considering time on your journey back to the church, or what your background was? Were you always Catholic? Were you a convert to the faith, and so on and so forth?
I'm a cradle Catholic, raised in the 80s and 90s in Catholic schools. Out here, I was always back and forth between here and Texas because my dad's oil and gas industry. So what that means to have been raised in the 80s and 90s Catholic church is you're a secular humanist. You learn from essentially coloring book workbooks. You're taught by usually a liberal ex-nun who taught you, that Adam and Eve were figurative, sin was figurative, mortal sin, hell, all this stuff. And you colored basically for 45-minute classes in your religion classes, scars and eye patches onto all of the nerds depicted like rapping about Jesus in some field on like a table sitting like A.C. Slater. That's what it means to be raised Catholic in the 80s and 90s church. So literally all of my friends were in some state of apostasy at all times, sometimes right then. I kind of just never believed it. Honestly, I was talking to Michael Knowles about this. I just never believed. I mean, that's just not believable, the way that the faith was presented. The people that presented it didn't really believe it. They presented it as a kind of symbolic nicety. And so, yeah, it's not that I fell away. I mean, I was raised in that kind of Novus Ordo Seclorum faith. I'm not talking about the liturgy. Why would you think that? I'm just talking about the New World Order. I was raised with that as the centerpiece, surrounded by secular humanism as kind of the focal point of that way of life. And so, yeah, I don't know whether I'd call it a conversion or a reversion when I realized, again, from a couple conversations I had with Michael Knowles, oh my gosh, this is all real. All the stuff I kind of half heard about and looked into some when I was young is all real, except it's not symbolic. That happened mainly for me when I started studying Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas in philosophy classes. When I decided I wanted to go to Italy to get a doctorate in philosophy, I was there intellectually. I realized this stuff was actually more plausible than not. Atheism's very implausible. It's the last superstition, as Edward Feser calls it, aptly. But I still wasn't there, in spirit or whatever. So I was learning all this Thomism, loving it, believing it, but not yet practicing. I still hadn't been, I just still thought that even though I'd gone to some Latin masses and loved that, it wasn't until real suffering came into our lives, my wife's and mine, in the form of terror and, going through a couple brain surgeries with our firstborn daughter, who was born out there in Italy, that really I brought myself into the fullness of the faith. The Holy Spirit rather brought me into the fullness of the faith. So it's a real thing. You have to make the intellectual and the voluntary conversions, the will and the intellect, and they don't always happen at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting. I can relate to those both because I was born into the church 27 days after I was physically born, not really raised in the faith necessarily. So it's kind of weird to say that you're a revert when you never really were practicing the faith.
Right.
So it's like almost you are a convert because you encountered Christ and you encountered Holy Mother Church and fell in love with that. Now it's funny because you speak to two things. One is that intellectual conversion. Would you say that was part of it? And you being a Thomist, I'm a life professed Third Order Dominican, so of course, happy belated feast day to us both of St. Thomas Aquinas.
You too.
Yeah, thanks, brother. And I think about he talks about knowledge being the primary virtue, right? That because knowledge leads to love. And you talked about two things that is kind of counter to what we see in the world, but definitely in the church of today. And I don't mean that like the broad Holy Mother Church as that's what it's intended to, but just what we see where we're in the first time in American history, we're in a post-Christian era. We see droves of people just leaving the church, especially the Catholic Church. And two things you're talking about is one, intellectual conversion, and two, you came to know Christ through suffering, right? And whereas right now a lot of people try to separate the gospel from suffering, try to separate the cross from the glory and the crown. And and I thought, so can you maybe elaborate just a little bit more on that experience that with your daughter? What was it about that moment that hit was the Jesus 2x4 that knocked you upside your head?
Yeah, well, I'll take the second question first. Okay. I mean, I was literally raised in a church, a Novus Ordo parish, where we had the like slam dunk Jesus. He wasn't affixed to the cross, and you probably were too. If you weren't, then you're one of the 30%. I mean, these were very common in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. The cross has literally been removed from the crucifixion, which is, for some reason, it's central to our iconography as Christians. We're the only faith that knows how to make anything of the problem of evil. It's called the problem of evil. It really is the problem of suffering. Mm-hmm. It's like, moronic atheist philosophers ask this question like it's deep, like why do bad things happen to good people? It's not very complex. Sin, right?
Yeah, original sin.
Yeah, original sin. There wasn't going to be a need for an incarnated savior before Adam and Eve fell. There wasn't need for an answer to sin, suffering, sickness, and death because there wasn't any. And all that was born when Adam and Eve sinned. Mm-hmm. So it was just quite simply, I think, without oversimplifying, it's just Christianity's the one religion that knows what to do with suffering. As I've talked about before on my podcast, I mean, all the other world faiths have a risible, with a nod to ecumenism, a risible, laughable answer to the problem of suffering. Like Buddhism says, you just try to avoid it. Oh, and you do so by essentially nihilism. You try to annihilate all your desires, even the good ones. Almost the polar opposite of Roman Catholicism, which says all of your desires, properly ordered, are actually good. Mm-hmm. And desire is good because you're desiring God. You're desiring the good through desire. Yes, suffering will come your way. You unite yourself to Jesus on the cross when it does come your way. Mm-hmm. And without getting too narrative of voice, just my wife, we have 6 kids now, but we had none when Abby came along. She was the first, and Steph was perfectly healthy, my wife, walking every day. She'd been training for the Rome Marathon with me until she got pregnant. It was just a total shock. I'd never had anyone young or anyone I knew really even middle-aged get sick. Abby wasn't born sick with like a disease. She had an in utero stroke, and it was just a very stressful next half decade. The first 4 or 5 years of Abby's life, being born there in Italy. I spoke Italian, my wife didn't. We were getting separated at the hospitals. She needed a couple brain surgeries right away. She was going to have, developmental delays, all that stuff. Every time a doctor would walk into the room, we thought there would be some sort of definitive answer to our question, how's she going to be? She's like not yet 12, but we look back and we laugh. Just, we wanted to know everything. We thought it was all going to be. We thought doctors could tell us anything, which they really can't. They're not prognosticators. But we were so worried that our lives would be altered. And of course, they were in the sense of Abby, but she's really the household saint. And she really, if I could say, Holy Thursday, we went to Mass when she was 3. And I was struggling bad hypochondria. I was balding from the stress. I was in law school because that's what I did when we came home. And having a kind of new, still sick daughter in and out of children's hospitals while going to law school is not a good proposition. If you're thinking of doing all these things together, if you're considering them as an option in your life, I advise against it. To take the daughter, try to avoid the law school. But yeah, so we went to Mass. Abby spoke only a few words. I'd been given very good advice to pray to the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity, for fortitude, because most people skip that, including myself to that point. I did so the night before when I was waking up with panic, anxiety, physical pain. Lots of pain comes from stress. They don't tell you this, bodily pain. Mm-hmm. And less than 18 hours later, we went to Holy Thursday Mass at the beginning of the Triduum, then when Abby was 30. And she's literally, this is not me, I don't usually believe people when they say this stuff. She was in a kind of anthemic chant, just repeating in a whisper, Holy Spirit. She could barely even speak. Mm. So, 18 hours later. So it wasn't like a kind of Protestant evangelical moment. I already knew this stuff was the truth. Mm-hmm. It just was the first extraordinary supernatural thing I'd ever really experienced. Mm-hmm. And haven't really experienced many since. But the point is, I knew it intellectually, and that brought me into the fullness of, okay, whatever. I'm not just a Thomist. I'm not just Catholic because of Thomas. I'm Catholic because of Jesus. I've never expressed it that way. That's probably the moment when I said, I'm Catholic because of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Thomas is maybe the smartest man ever, but I'm a Catholic because of Jesus. He can do this. The Trinity can do this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Thomas can't.
That's right. No, I mean, it's an amazing story. And I think those of us who've experienced those types of personal miracles within our own family or marriage, whatever it may be, don't need any further proof of God's existence, outside of that. So I can definitely, relate, and that resonates with me as well. So, here you are. You've got 6 kids, and God bless you for raising a good Catholic family, and trying to do your part. The one of the things I know that's near and dear to your heart is really this restoration of authentic Catholic masculinity. And I wanted to talk to you about that. I've had other folks on the show talking about the same thing. That's definitely a ministry that's near and dear to my heart, in particular because I was a product of the 80s and 90s, like you. I don't think we're that far off in age, especially just watching some of your shows, and especially your last one that you were talking about, Kobe and everything else. So we're both Kobe fans and Laker fans.
R.I.P.
Yeah, praying for the repose of their souls, and definitely those that also perished along with them, but definitely for fellow Catholics. I grew up and I was a product of my upbringing, of the societal pressures. I grew up, all my viewers and listeners know about my just abusive background, right? So all forms of abuse by age of 10. Really sought out the culture and what it had, especially me and my 2 older siblings. I'm the middle of 5 that are alive, 2 sisters that are in heaven. But me and my 2 older siblings in particular subscribed to what the culture had to say about dealing with masculinity and all of our pain and suffering and, self-medicating and all of that. So as you can imagine, right, it was false masculinity. It was the Homer Simpson environment. It was the Al Bundy of the world. And so I know that's something that's part of your ministry, and I don't want to misspeak if it's not, but just wanted to talk a little bit about that, about your thoughts on the state of masculinity in today's world, and what we can do to help restore what God has created us men to do as chief protectors, servants, and defenders of all things that are entrusted to us.
Well, the state of masculinity in the world and the church now is non-existent, so it's a non-status. I mean, that's how piss poor it is. It's that bad. I've been to so many, through either Catholic schools, attending or teaching, seminars where they start out with the right kind of moment and they say, hey, we need to restore Catholic masculinity, we need to resuscitate it, and then they proceed to speak in the same kind of anodyne truisms that got us here in the first place, never addressing the problem. So I'll do it right now. The patriarchy is good. The Christian order is the patriarchy. It's actually a byword for Christianity. It was a byword for Judaism before Jesus came to earth. The ecclesial fatherhood is a patriarchy, the apostles, and the familial fatherhood, the households, is a patriarchy, right? Households need to be, the domestic church is what the Pope John Paul II called it. It's led by fathers, just as the bishops are supposed to be led by fathers, right? There's a kind of effeminate vibe in the episcopate now. That's the main problem there, is homosexualism, a kind of effeminacy. The effeminate vibe in the laity, the main problem there is most people have been brainwashed to say this incredibly obviously untrue thing, an emperor's new clothes moment, like the mother runs the household, or they'll be hanging out with guys. Me and Taylor Marshall, when we became friends, just on the phone, we were talking about like, yeah, dude, I mean, maybe some good guys have said it because they're influenced too, but I don't hang out with guys that say, let me go ask my boss, right? That's not macho false manhood to repudiate that. It's literally, I'm going to ask myself, right? So, I mean, to speak bluntly, men need to be virtuous. A lot of these little seminars in Catholic circles will tend to that, because that's kind of anodyne to say it that way. They need to be chaste, same. You'll actually hear that. But women, in terms of what they need to do, first off, again, the first part is we need to give them good leaders to follow, but they need to be obedient, right? They need to, and they want to. This is our nature. We want to lead. Men are trained to lead. Not everyone can be president of the USA, but everyone can be president of his own household. That's why even the cardinal virtues, the 4 cardinal virtues, all bring a man in the direction of leadership. The 4 cardinal virtues, same virtues in women, bring them toward fealty or obedience. So even the virtues show up in different ways. Now, so what do we need to do? Here's the politically incorrect part. We need to go back to our own domains, right? Women need to honestly excuse themselves. This isn't going to happen legally, but we need to do it culturally. Excuse themselves from the workplace, sports, the playground. Everywhere you go, as I said in the now somewhat famous interview with Matt Fradd, you just hear this kind of false leadership, and it's shrill and it's bad and it's emasculating. Testosterone, literally, I spoke to a doctor not long ago, is at an all-time low since it's been recorded. Testosterone waxes and wanes based on things like even hearing a certain pitch, a shrill tone, can make your testosterone diminish. Same thing with not lifting weights, being taught to fight, being manly. It's a real thing. Mm-hmm. So this is what you're probably not going to hear. Yeah, like men are born to be leaders, women are not, and the patriarchy is a good thing. Christianity is the patriarchy. It's bimodal. There's an ecclesial patriarchy. We're kind of all parish orphans. We don't have episcopal fathers, most of us, that are doing well by us. Most of us didn't have familial fathers that were, enforcing church, telling us to go to church. Even those of us that did go to church, and even those of us who were co-attended by church by our fathers, is usually the mother saying go to church, which is good for her. But the fathers are the ones that were deficient in that duty, much like Adam to Eve. They're just picking up the slack. Men have to lead, women have to follow.
Well, you bring up a good point, because I've said this in the circles that I'm in, and to a lot of the different venues that I speak to, between retreats, conferences, you name it. And I say we're experiencing a father issue both in the culture, and we can see that with just look at society and the breakdown and the attack on family, and we're experiencing that now in the church. We're experiencing a spiritual father wound, and then look at what's happening. You see the destruction in both. And there would be people that are going to shy away from obviously you being as blunt as you are because they don't want to hear the truth, or they're trying to, I don't know, maybe make up for the reality that they're faced with, right? Because there's a part of it, I would say, because men have abdicated their responsibilities as being real men and had bought into the lies of the culture and all the other, aggressive feminism, all this other garbage that's out there, that they don't even know how to be a man anymore. Right. And so now it's like, well, what do I do? And there's not that level of fortitude and courage that's required in order for us to say, look, like I've got a very strong wife, but she realizes, we had this discussion often, that the impact and the influence that I had, if I didn't turn my butt around and own the faith and fall in love with Christ and do what I need to do, none of my 3 adult children have a shot at practicing the faith. Studies will show that, right? And so it's just like, right. It may seem a little bit unfair, but like you said, we were designed equal in dignity, but uniquely in our role on this earth. And, that desire to lead. And again, going back to the point you made, and I don't know if that was a reference to Ephesians 5, right? That women could be subject to husbands as the church is to Christ, if we're all being Christ-like. And I think I was just teaching a marriage prep class, talking and breaking it open on the domestic church about we need to be priests of our homes.
A couple things there.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it's not just Ephesians 5. It's like 15 spots in the New Testament, all over the Old Testament, obviously. Mm-hmm. It's crystal clear. Even if your pastor at church refuses to read those bracketed lines in the missal on Ephesians 5. People just know Ephesians 5. It's crystal clear. There's no debating it. There was even no reasonable opposing position in Jesus' day or the day of the Jews before Jesus. So it's a ridiculous proposition. It's not even under question. Men are the leaders, right? Jesus didn't even consider making women priests, bishops, or deacons. He didn't even consider that the women would be household leaders. It's simply and straightforwardly diabolical. Now, you said your wife is strong. The stronger the woman, this is undoing the diabolical, the more obedient she'll be. The weaker the woman, the less obedient she'll be. It's that simple. That's literal. Who's the strongest woman of all time? The best woman of all time?
The
most obedient woman of all time. Mm-hmm. So people will say, oh, well, what do I do? My wife's really strong. She's genuinely obedient to me. And also, there's another fallacy out there. This is one thing. Because we've been so lied to, this is the final attack by the devil on the church, according to the late, great Cardinal Caffarra. He said this in May of 2017 before he died at the Rome Life Summit. This is it. Feminism it's also one of the first attacks. It's the attack on Adam and Eve, right? Mm-hmm. Eve spoke, Adam was just there, whatever, twiddling his thumbs. Mm-hmm. He's supposed to be the spokesman. He's supposed to make the decisions. He's supposed to be the one representing the moral heart of the family. Mm-hmm. But it's also the last, because feminism has now, aside from Adam and Eve making the ancient preternatural appearance, it's making its most bold appearance in society ever the last 50 years. And look what it's done. It's destroyed everything. All of the finest institutions in the world, up and including the one truly sublime institution, the church. Mm-hmm. It's rotting it all from the inside out. It's all feminism. It's the most wicked, diabolic attack in the history of the church. But what I was going to say that's really important is a lot of women or families that are kind of in the process of turning around on this, because it's so countercultural, mm-hmm. because it's the main wicked force in society, worse than any other bad force. They'll say, oh, yeah, no, okay, Christian teaching clearly says that. I'm writing the book, No Christian Feminism. It's done. We're waiting for that to come out later in the year with Sophia Press. They're struggling with it because it goes against every impulse that has been inculcated in them. They'll say, okay, yeah, but only if the man's perfect. No, at the Council of Trent, in the Catechism, it's crystal clear. Women must obey their husbands, as Ephesians 5 says, in everything except when they're being led directly into mortal sin. So yes, aspirationally, men need to be as good as they can be, but democracy doesn't work. It's Plato, Aristotle, Thomas's form, their favorite form of a corrupt regime. So a democracy between a man and a wife leading the household is ridiculous. You know, it's risible. So yes, men decide everything. Of course, as JP2 talked about, the woman is not like a child in the household. She's the console. She can give a cool, deliberate sense of kind of a committee in a good way to the man. But if the man says, yeah, I liked getting your input on that, but no, I'm not going to do it. This is what should be happening a lot. That's final, right? The fact that we even have to be talking about this, John, shows how just hamstrung society is. Worse than hamstrung, hobbled, right? We can't even put weight on our legs. Like, we can't even you go to the store, all I hear anywhere I go into public is just women kind of running the show or hollering at their husbands, or men it's absolutely diabolical. Men do not need to be perfect to be leaders any more than men who are bishops need to be perfect to be good bishops. They need to be good enough and not leading their families into mortal sin. Anything else besides leading into mortal sin, they need to be obeyed. Direct reflection of obeying Jesus for a woman or a child. Obey your father, obey your husband.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's some work to be done there, obviously, just because of where we are in the state of the culture in the church. And I would say for the listeners out there, because, you know, that's good. That makes people uncomfortable, bottom line. And, you know, we can.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, it should. You're paying attention, right? I mean, bottom line is what we're doing isn't working. You know, it hasn't worked. And we see that souls are being lost because of it. Families are being destroyed because of it. The church is suffering because of it. And, you know, I would call the men and challenge them that you should be even though what you're saying there, Tim, is like, you know, they don't need to be perfect. I'm like, you better be striving for perfection. I mean, you know, on the heels of just losing one of the greatest basketball players to ever live, when you talk about how he was, you know, so determined to be perfect in his craft and all of the things that he did, it's like we need to go to work at virtue that way, right? And we need to go to work at leading our families to holiness. So that's the thing that, for me, as a man who used to be the example of what not to be, you know, because that's what was handed down to me. Like, I've had that conversion in my life. I've experienced the miracles in my life and my marriage and my family. I'm like, I'm a no-nonsense guy. I'm a soldier for Christ, and I'm willing to die for him. So every day I'm going to go after and attack vice and cultivate virtue in my life. And so that's what, like, the message to the men out there. Women it's going to be a way easier for a woman to obey, honestly, when the man's trying to be Christ-like. That's the reality, right? So even though what you're saying, Tim, is like, yeah, you know, and we hear that in Scripture. We know that's the teaching of the church. We understand the order, the hierarchy that God has created. But man, if we just do our jobs, if Adam just does what he was charged to do, you know, to till and to keep, and the original sense and definition of the word, then everything falls in line, you know. Everything just falls in line. So I know there's a...
Sure. Yeah. Though, to avoid remember, there's nothing... This is kind of like saying... Absolutely. I mean, in the Feminism book that I just completed when my brother turned in the manuscript, I wrote the chapter on manly virtue, how to do it, how to return to it. But again, I just where I recoil, and I'm not saying you were doing this, but a lot of people kind of were. When I talked to Matt Frag, when I talked to Trent Horn, they're kind of recoiling. You literally see as further evidence of the feminism in society, the fact that people are getting uncomfortable and they're saying, well, let's just take it all on our shoulders. Let's take all the blame. It's like, no, I mean, men can take the blame and say, yeah, I mean, dude, men are pathetic now. Their testosterone's low. They're addicted to pornography. I can talk all of the patheticness of men, but we need to talk about the patheticness of modern women too. Mm-hmm. We need to do both together. And men being bad leaders, and really, ultimately, it's kind of their fault. Ultimately, original sin is kind of the fault of Adam, not Eve. So that kind of people breathe out, okay, you can't say anything negative about women. But no, women being shrill, a lot of women, even if they have good men, this is the reality, are fighting for it because they've been inculcated with it every day of their lives. I would agree with that. So it doesn't, I do recoil a bit when you start saying, because I know some good men that are even still kind of struggling, very meritorious men that deserve the throne of household fathership. Yeah.
I do think it takes both, Tim. So I would agree with you. And to kind of put the flesh to the bone on this, Doug Berry and I did a woman's session when he came out here. We just had him and Jesse Romero and I did a men's conference in November for our Apostle World Ablaze, and we did a women's session to talk about to bring up all of these issues. And I remember having an after, there's over 200 women that were there, had obviously a lot of interest in two guys trying to tell them what it's like, about feminine genius, if you will. And one of the women flat out admitted, she was just like, trying to figure out the role with her and her husband. And she at least came to the realization, she says, you know what, I don't let him lead. And I said, boom, that's the problem, right? So here we have this struggle with the men being, emasculated, and we got to own that, and we got to figure that piece out. But you're not helping when you're all of a sudden stepping into that role, and maybe justified in the sense because he hasn't been doing a damn thing, right? So it's that struggle so I hear what you're saying, but it is that struggle, right? That because if we stepped out of the gap, women try to fill that gap, whether they're doing it with good intentions or because they've been, have been lied to and have bought into the lies of the culture. Then we see that struggle now. I think that's the part where I would see it, but no, that crystallized it for me because the gal was like, bottom line is like, I'm not even letting him lead, huh? I'm like, nah. So
look, power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely, like Lord Acton said. So, and nature despises a vacuum. I'm speaking in two platitudes, but they're both true. Mm-hmm. So what happened? Sure, men left a kind of vacuum of power at all levels of society. The cell of society, the household. Mm-hmm. All the institutions in between, now the state, and women rushed in and took the power. But just do basic human psychology for people out there scratching their heads. Mm-hmm. Now they're in those posts. Women got into the workplace. Women started pretending they were fathers at home as mothers. They started pretending they were born to lead. And they got a taste of the power. And now, yes, that ultimately is, when you're in charge the way men are, everything's your fault. In an ultimate sense, so I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm. This isn't a pro-man session. Men are ultimately the most pathetic in this, but women are definitely not off the hook because it's such a common problem. Now they've got a taste for the power. They like it. Even good Catholic women, because I do conferences too. I give this talk everywhere. Mm-hmm. People DM me to the tune of 5 a day, 10 a day. They're like, yeah, I'm doing this. Or some of them will fight me and they'll be like, yeah, you're kind of right about the doctrine, but I like some of them will outright admit it. It's all around. It is the water we're swimming in, the dirty water we're swimming in. So the first rule of feminism, by the way, is never allow someone to say a negative thing about any woman, right? And so that's why and people don't know these rules because they're presupposed. They're not supposed. So everyone gets uncomfortable. They start squirming in your seat. We're like, oh, that woman's bad, and she's bad. You could say that about a man all day long. That dude's bad, man. What an idiot. But you say that about a woman, like, oh man, she's really bad. She needs, give her a dressing down or whatever. People just can't handle it. They've all received the cues from these deciders who decided on the sexual revolution, and they put it into everything: commercials, home products commercials, TV shows. It's always a fat sluggard of a husband and a keen, chipper, bossy, officious wife that's pretty smart with a stupid Homer Simpson husband. It's in everything. Mm-hmm. We have to resist it. No one's going to represent our rights but us.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that as we kind of wrap this up, because I know we are good on time here as far as just respecting your time. You said you got a couple of books coming out, so you've got the rules for retrograde. So those, I know we can see the what am I looking for here? The logo right behind you. Well, the logo right behind your head. It's off of your YouTube channel, right, Tim? So is it your YouTube channel?
Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah, it's, me and my brother share it. We put it in my name, coming off of TNT. Yeah.
Okay, so it's how do they find that? Is it Tim Gordon or Timothy Gordon is the YouTube channel?
Yeah, just Timothy Gordon. Okay. If you search Timothy Gordon, a lot of people still haven't found me after leaving the TNT show, which was a sensation. Just search Timothy Gordon and you'll run into
or Rules for Retrograde for that. Yeah, Rules for Retrograde. So encourage everyone out there to go check out. You guys are doing 3 shows a week now, Tim?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then let's talk about the book. The pre-order is live now. You got the foreword written by Michael Knowles. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the Rules for Retrogrades is not only the name of the show, but it's kind of the name of the brand. It's our book. It's with Tan. Michael Knowles wrote it because it's really a reversal of Saul Alinsky in Michael Knowles' words. Saul Alinsky's looking up from the afterlife. I like that. Seeing that now all these boomer rules, the baby boomers are really the generation of the radicals. Mm-hmm. They capitulated to radicalism even if they weren't radicals. And it's all we're undoing it all. And again, it's all very specific attacks, the way that Rules for Radicals, the book by Alinsky's specific attacks on pop psychology. Mm-hmm. So you've heard kind of our approach. It's we're not, it's not all nice stuff. A lot of it's, okay, here's an attack plan. Here's how you do this stuff. A lot of it's fusty. And it's 40 rules, whereas you only get 14, I think, if you read Saul Alinsky's book. And it's how to undo everything, to restore patriarchy, how to restore order, how to restore faith, hope, and charity, beauty, goodness, and truth. Christendom, how to bring it all back. And again, it's not just platitudes. Kind of like, what I'm telling people is it's the equivalent of, this is not going to be going to a Restore Masculinity conference where we don't say anything that'll make even the conservative Catholics uncomfortable. We're like, no, we're giving you specific attack plans to retake the culture. It's sufficiently specific as to make even conservatives uncomfortable with this stuff will work. And if homosexuals go into a Christian little bakery shop and make them, and this is kind of outmoded now, make them bake them a pro-gay marriage cake, then find your local homosexual baker and go into their cake shop and make them bake you a cake that says marriage is between a man and a woman. Right? Christians need to be thinking more like soldiers or more like intel officers. This is the only way to win the culture war. It's not just by being a bunch of nerdy Ned Flanderses. We've been told that, I think, it is a part of an infiltration operation. Mm-hmm. Taylor Marshall would tell it that way. Mm-hmm. And Christians just have to be nerds. It's like, no, that's not what I'm going to do. We have to be. That's how the United States wins wars. Is when you go to war, you go Roman. Mm. It's the main idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because I think there's that thought out there to your point you just tried to make about that false charity and false humility. Right? We're supposed to be doormats to be Christian or something, or there's a part where we've got to wage war against evil. We're in this time. This is a time and a generation and an era, both in the culture and in the church, where saints are going to be made. And if you're not doing
right.
you're not in training, you don't have a battle plan, then you're going to be part of the problem. You're going to be part of the casualties. And I would say not on my watch, brother. So I would encourage everybody out there to go and check out Tim and his crew doing Rules for Retrograde on their YouTube channel. Definitely take a look at the book that's coming out there. That's going to be a battle plan for you, how to get involved. And if you're bothered by some of this conversation, good. That means you're paying attention, right? That you need to wrestle with it, because I think Tim seems the Tim I've at least witnessed is and your brother and Chris and everyone that's involved are. You guys love God, you love the church to a point where you're going to speak some of these unpleasantries on people's ears, and you're willing to have dialogue about it. So, which is, you saw that with you with Matt Fradd and Trent Horn. So anyways, brother, I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy doing a lot of things. Definitely you and your family, most importantly, are going to be in my prayers. So I hope everything goes well with you guys for the rest of 2020. And God bless you and the work that you're doing for God and for the church.
You too, brother. Thanks for your time and thanks for your prayers. Great ministry you got here. It's good to know there's at least one other guy in the Great Central Valley doing some Roman Catholicism. Yeah, and of course, remember, everybody loved the truth. The truth is a person. Jesus came not to bring peace, but a sword, in his own words.
Amen. So yeah, if Luke 12:49, our apostle, right? I came to set the earth on fire, and how I wish it was already blazing. Boy, that's right. That's not a message for us. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we live in, the world of Blaze and Veritas. As another fellow Thomas here, we gotta seek truth above all things, most especially in the person of Jesus Christ our Lord. So, brother, God bless you, and until next time.
You too, brother. Peace.
True faith, real talk. Don't Don't forget to like and subscribe to the show. Continue the conversation online. Visit johnsablan.com. Until next time, get holy or die trying. Godspeed.